Welcome to the Battle Ready Sermon Podcast with Captain Rob Westwood-Payne.
As we meet to remember those who died and who were affected by conflicts now many years ago, or with that video, conflicts a little bit closer to our time, we think for a few moments about the challenge of peace in these days. I want to introduce you, probably reintroduce you to this man. Anybody remember his name? Harry Patch. Harry Patch was born in 1898 and was one of the last remaining survivors of the First World War. He was the last surviving British soldier to serve in Belgium or France in the line of trenches known as the Western Front, and he died in 2009. He was a private in the Duke of Cornwall's Light Infantry and fought at the Third Battle of Ypres. After the war, he became a plumber, and during the Second World War, he was a fireman. And throughout all this time, Harry didn't speak about his experience in the trenches of the First World War. And it was only when he reached the age of 100 years that he started to tell his story. Like so many others who took part in that war, the war was a distant but horrific memory and was too painful to relive. An old song of the time goes, and when they ask us how dangerous it was, we'll never tell them. No, we'll never tell them. In November 2004, at the age of 106, Harry went back to the battlefields in Belgium and was introduced to the 108-year-old German Charles Kuntz, who had fought for the German army at the Battle of Passchendaele. Their meeting was warm and they exchanged gifts. Patch said, "I was a bit doubtful before meeting a German soldier. Herr Kuntz is a very nice gentleman, however. He is all for a united Europe and peace, and so am I." War is devastating. It brings instability, sadness, and grief to all the individuals and the nations involved. Sometimes the soldiers who are sent out to fight are simply unaware of the reasons that they are involved in a war. They don't fully understand why they have to fight and kill soldiers from another army. War, as we know, isn't declared by individuals. It's called by governments or by powerful factions. Ordinary people, like Harry Patch, like the thousands of people who are living in refugee camps in Europe because of conflicts in the Middle East, are caught in the middle. Harry Patch once said, "Why should the British government call me up and take me out to a battlefield to shoot a man I never knew, whose language I couldn't speak? All those lives lost for a war finished over a table." Now, what's the sense in that? It's just an argument between two governments. I don't think it's possible to truly explain the bond that is forged between a soldier in the trenches and his fellow soldiers. There you all are, no matter what your life in Civvy Street, covered in lice, desperately hungry, eking out the small treats, the ounce of tobacco, the biscuit. You relied on him and he on you, never really thinking that it was just the same for the enemy. But it was. It was every bit as bad. Harry Patch's reflections on war speak of a hopeless situation. And that was true of Israel and Judah in a Bible reading that we're going to look at together this morning. Two little Jewish kingdoms that Micah prophesies to in our passage this morning. The leaders of both kingdoms had disobeyed God and led their nations away from him. War was about to be forced on them because of their leaders' actions. Assyria was about to pounce on Israel and put an end to that kingdom. And then the Assyrian army would turn on Judah and almost capture Jerusalem. And so as we listen and look at Micah's words once more this morning, we can make out that strange mixture of doom and hope. Micah deals with death and destruction, but he also encourages God's people to look ahead to what he promised for them. So if you brought your Bible with you or your Bible app, you might want to turn to these words. They're in Micah chapter 4 and verses 1 to 5. And if you've got a copy of the message notes, which were scattered around on the seats, then you might want to follow those as well. Micah chapter 4 and verses 1 to 5. In the last days, the mountain of the Lord's house will be the highest of all, the most important place on earth. It will be raised above the other hills, and people from all over the world will stream there to worship. People from many nations will come and say, "Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of Jacob's God. There he will teach us his ways, and we will walk in his paths. For the Lord's teaching will go out from Zion, his word will go out from Jerusalem. The Lord will mediate between peoples and will settle disputes between strong nations far away. They will hammer their swords into ploughshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will no longer fight against nation, nor train for war anymore. Everyone will live in peace and prosperity, enjoying their own grapevines and fig trees, for there will be nothing to fear. The Lord of heaven's armies has made this promise. Though the nations around us follow their idols, we will follow the Lord our God forever and ever." Right in the middle of those verses, Micah says in verse 3, "One day the Lord will mediate between peoples and will settle disputes between strong nations far away. They will hammer their swords into ploughshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will no longer fight against nation, nor train for war anymore." God promises through his prophet Micah that in the days to come, these promises will be fulfilled. The remnant of God's people from Babylon would be restored. Individual lives will be changed, but the selfish, brutal, warring political purposes of the nations will also be transformed. One day God will sit in judgment amongst the nations of the world. He will settle their disputes. He will iron out their differences. He will remove international conflict and ensure that people do not need to go to war again. The instruments of war will no longer be needed. No longer will nations covet what does not belong to them. There will be no need to live by the sword or the gun or the nuclear weapon. Each person will live in peace. And we have a guarantee, a 100% guarantee that this will happen, because Micah confirms the Lord of heaven's armies has made this promise. That vision that Micah shows to us will be fulfilled. Pedro Reyes, who's going to appear on the screen just now, is an artist from Mexico City, and he transforms weapons discarded by the Mexican army for his project, which he calls Disarm. So far, he has transformed 6,700 guns that were turned in or seized by the army and the police into musical instruments. So that musical instrument that he's carrying, a violin of sorts, I guess, is made from the weapons that have been captured, the guns that have been captured. The guns come from Ciudad Juarez, could be, that's how you pronounce it, a city of about 1.3 million people that averaged about 10 killings a day at the height of its drug violence. Reyes said that the guns he used are just the tip of the iceberg of all the weapons that are seized every day and that the army has to destroy. But rather than succumb to despair, Reyes took those very instruments used for violence and created instruments for music. Reyes already was well known for a 2008 project called Palas por Pistolas, or Pistols to Shovels, which echoes those words from Micah. in which he melted down 1,527 weapons to make the same number of shovels to plant the same number of trees. Reyes stresses that his work isn't a protest, but a proposal. To me, at least, he says, the concept is about taking the weapons that are destructive in nature and chaotic and trying to make them for something else, so that instead of objects of destruction, they become objects of creation. Art, for Reyes, is about transformation. He takes objects of destruction and transforms them into objects of creation. It is not an accident that Reyes' creative work harkens back to that ancient vision of both prophets, Isaiah and Micah, when on the great day of the Lord they will hammer their swords into ploughshares. Pedro's art mirrors that inspirational picture that Micah gives us of nations turning their weapons of mass destruction into instruments of mass provision. As Christians, we are called to do the work of God by focusing on and practicing fairness and justice. It's only in that way that peace will characterize our personal relationships and the relationships that we have between nations. If we go through life personally, envying what others have, stealing from them, living in conflict with those around us, harboring bitterness, taking revenge on those who have hurt us, fighting with each other and declaring war on other nations, well then war will continue. But if we live to please God, if we live to be just to others, if we live to practice forgiveness, if we live to show grace, if we live to make peace, if we live to suffer for the sake of others, then peace will follow. When Jesus gives his great Sermon on the Mount, he says these words found in Matthew chapter 5 and verses 3 to 10. God blesses those who are poor and realize their need for him, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. God blesses those who mourn, for they will be comforted. God blesses those who are humble, for they will inherit the whole earth. God blesses those who hunger and thirst for justice, for they will be satisfied. God blesses those who are merciful, for they will be shown mercy. God blesses those whose hearts are pure, for they will see God. God blesses those who work for peace, for they will be called the children of God. God blesses those who are persecuted for doing right, for the kingdom of heavens is theirs. Jesus' words remind us that the time of peace prophesied by Micah hasn't yet fully come. Have you noticed that? It's not there yet. Not everyone obeys God's laws yet. Not everyone worships him at the moment. Wars still happen. People still grieve. People are still treated badly for doing the right thing. People and nations still need to make peace with each other. But these verses show us, as God's people, the essence of being like Christ. Being merciful, obeying God, being humble, being pure, making peace. And the question I have for each of us this morning, myself is included, is will we walk this way as we wait for God to fulfill his promise? Will we conform to his covenant of peace? Will we herald God's future peace in our own lives? I don't know if you know who this is. Another person on the screen. This is Shane Claiborne. You may have heard his name. He's a Christian activist and author. And he tells this story. When he was in Baghdad during the initial stages of the Iraqi war, as a civilian and a peacemaker, he attended a birthday party for a girl whose family he'd become friends with. She was turning 13. The friends and family gathered in a nearby park where they had a feast. They played games and ran around in circles until they fell over. At one point, they began playing balloon volleyball when bombs began exploding in the background. The adults looked at one another with fear and uneasiness, but not wanting to scare the kids, they kept playing. Then an explosion went off nearby. The adults huddled with the kids to protect them with their bodies. Shane looked into the eyes of the young teenage birthday girl who told him, with such an incredible amount of courage, "It's okay. Don't be scared." Then she smacked Shane on the head with a balloon. These children were raised hearing bombs going off and still wanting to play with people whose country was destroying theirs. When asked what she wished for as she blew out her candles later, she answered without any coaching, peace. She hoped for, She hoped for, and perhaps believed, that maybe one day people would stop trying to kill each other. The Bible says, "And a little child will lead them." As we reflect on that story and reflect on what Micah has said to us this morning, the question is, will we lead them? Will we lead the people around us? The people that we're with this time tomorrow, just like that 13-year-old girl did, and pledged to be peacemakers in our own lives. I pray that we will.
If you would like to subscribe to Battle Ready Sermons wherever you choose to listen to podcasts, or if you'd like to receive them direct to your inbox, head to www.equippinghispeople.com/sermons and follow the instructions.